Since the 1960s, almost 1,000 children in Nottinghamshire's care system were abused, sexually, physically, and psychologically. Many of them were failed not once, but over and over, by the very institutions meant to protect them.
I kept it in my system for 50 odd years.
You learn to cope with it, but it does not leave you.
In the course of this inquiry, I heard, amongst the most compelling and moving and harrowing testimony from any victim that I've ever heard.
We were forgotten again, and still they're doing nothing for victims and survivors.
The country cannot let them down again.
Despite finding the courage to speak up, many survivors say they never received the care they so desperately needed and deserved. They were left unheard, unseen, unprotected. The dark and disturbing truth about abuse in Nottinghamshire's children's care homes was laid bare during the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, which concluded in 2022. It heard harrowing testimonies of systematic neglect and institutional failure. But for many, the trauma of those years has never truly ended. Phil Dooley was just 4 years old when he was first sexually abused.
I can remember going up Woodborough Road in a big black car. We came to this big wall and we went into the gates to a big house.
After years of abuse at home, Phil was placed at Beechwood Boys' Home, where people who should have cared for him continued to hurt him.
I was made to take all my clothes off, and they fiddled about with me and just left me there, and I can remember now, I can see it. I was shivering, and I think from that day I couldn't talk to people in authority.
And Beechwood wasn't alone. In total, there were 22 children's homes under investigation by the Nottinghamshire Police. What emerged was a culture of silence, of looking the other way.
The authority knew what was going on in the homes, especially Beechwood. I heard a lot of stories coming from that place, and I'm glad that it come to books. There's nothing in my record stating that something had happened to me. At first I was going to burn it all, but I'm glad I've kept it, because it doesn't remind me of the abuse anymore. It reminds me of a part of my life.
But support, although late, did come for Phil.
I do sincerely thank the Truth Project for saving me.
The Truth Project was an initiative that encouraged as many victims to come forward as possible to give evidence. And for many, this was an opportunity to seek closure.
It was a wonderful end of the journey. It is not your fault. You have to talk about what happened, whether it hurts or not. I've got my life back.
Maxie Lee was also placed into care as a young child. Her abuse wasn't limited to the walls of a children's home. It extended into the foster system, a place many thought was safer.
So I do have a history with social care. I went into care, and then my abuse started at age 8, that was sexual, physical. I'm going to say psychological abuse, and it continued until I was 26. But by then we were in foster care. I've accepted the abuse, everything that's happened to me.
The abuse stopped when Maxie was 26, but she knows dealing with it will be an all-consuming, lifelong sentence.
Nottingham City and the county had the biggest strand of victims and survivors coming forward. I was one of them. My sharing was the longest of everybody, because I'd not only been abused by my foster father, but I'd also been abused by his son. And I remember being so focused and together. And then I remember afterwards, when I was led out, my whole body shook, and I just went into a meltdown. And I remember my hair started to fall out. It was traumatic for me. It was a whirlwind, and then all of a sudden it comes to a stop. You're having to deal with the aftermath, and there was no support.
Maxie has dedicated the last 17 years of her life to helping others heal. In 2014, she set up her own charity called Support for Survivors, which now supports over 500 victims from across the East Midlands.
So I gave evidence on a personal level and also on a professional level for the victims and survivors who I put forward. Having the charity is a part of dealing with my lived experience by helping others.
While Maxie channels her energy into trying to make things right for herself and those she tirelessly supports, it's a complicated and challenging journey.
Because I've been having to look after the welfare of my abuser. My health has deteriorated really badly. And I've been in a very, very, very dark place, very dark. It's been very challenging for me. I've not been able to work. It's had an impact on the people that I support.
And that is not the only battle for charities like Maxie's, with budget cuts putting these services at risk of closing. Nottinghamshire has a commissioned service to help victims of sexual violence. It's called SVSS, and its waiting list is currently over 700 people. A spokesperson from the service said,
"We are working hard to bring the waiting list down, and there are other free support services to help survivors, including the helpline, mental health nurse, group therapy and other emotional and practical support."
But support for those who have been the victims of these horrific crimes should be a basic right.
What happened to us, right? I don't think we should have to pay to get help. Why should you, when you've suffered such awful abuse as a child, you're raped as a young girl that's not quite 11, from the minute you speak up, you should be being supported.
For Susan, not her real name, who asked to remain anonymous, her abuse also started in the place she was meant to be safe.
He was absolutely battering our mother to a pulp. And I mean battering her and my older brother. And he was getting me to touch him inappropriately. She met him when I was 18 months old, and they were married within a couple of months.
Susan's mother was a prostitute who spent time in prison and ended up falling for the man who would become Susan's abuser.
She left because of the violence, and she left all three of us there. We were terrified. He controlled everything about us. And my older brother, he managed to run away, jumped out the bedroom window one night, and I was left there. I did all the housework, I did everything. I was a slave, very little education. And I remember once a games teacher asking me why all my shoulders were bruised. There's a visit when I'm 6 months old. I don't see a doctor then until I'm 17 and a half. We were visited by social services. When social services or care workers or anybody goes into houses, please check the dynamic of that family. Check what the relationship is of the adults in that household to those children. Because he was telling people he was my father, and there was nothing to do with me.
Susan's experience, like so many others, is part of a pattern that went unchecked for decades.
I did ask for my records, and I thought, I need to know what happened. And even though I did try and persevere, I didn't find Nottingham very helpful at all. When I got hold of all these records, I found out that they did actually know he wasn't my father. And what happened, I took like 100 steps back.
For some, taking part in the inquiry was a lifeline, but Susan didn't get that chance.
I knew nothing about it, and I wish I had, because I certainly would have come forward.
More than 350 victims took part in the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, which looked at the treatment of Nottingham's vulnerable children. The inquiry uncovered widespread and long-standing failures. Councils, care staff and police were all found to have let children down.
There was strong evidence that people did know what was going on and may not have done nothing about it, but what they did do about it was completely inadequate. The local authority has quite a difficult role to play in a situation like this because they're there to help, essentially. There's no question that they don't accept that things went terribly wrong in the past. The difficulty is in balancing that with the understandable attitude that some of the victims have to the authority. It's not two sides battling against each other. It's an inquiry in which everybody's working towards the same end, which is trying to work out why things went as wrong as they did and trying to work out what should be done in the future to make sure it doesn't happen again.
While justice has come for some, many survivors feel abandoned once again, left to cope with the fallout alone. But amidst the pain, there is strength. In each other, survivors have found solidarity. And through initiatives like Maxie's, they're reclaiming power and purpose.
I just want to make it right in our communities.
I met my husband. He was just nice and ordinary and stable and a nice guy.
I got a little foster child. I'm so proud that even one child I've helped.
The past cannot be changed, but the future can be shaped by listening, by acting, and by never letting this happen again.